Okay, so we are live now. So, hi Meron. Good afternoon. I believe that's good afternoon there in your part of the world, right?
Yeah, it's quarter to 4 p.m., so good afternoon is very appropriate.
Okay, so before we start, I would like to first of all thank you for taking time and talking to me. And I would request you if you could introduce yourself for our audience. What do you do and who you are, whatever you want to introduce yourself.
Absolutely. So I'll try to keep it quick, and if I ramble too much, let me know.
Yeah.
So my name is Meron. I'm from Israel, born and raised. For the last 2 years, I've been dedicating most of my time to spreading the word of creating more freedom in life with entrepreneurship. And I've been doing that by interviewing and doing case studies with world-leading entrepreneurs that share how they do it. And when I noticed two interesting things, one is that almost every entrepreneur I talked to kept saying that it's crucial to have, obviously, someone to sell to. You need to have an audience before you have a business, or at least it makes it a lot easier. And the second thing I noticed is that people are struggling with building an audience, and I could help them. I have 10 years experience in radio. I love teaching and I love entrepreneurship. So a few months ago, I opened up the Inspiring Innovation Podcast Incubator, where I do just that. I help people launch their podcast. I hope successfully, like yours is going to be. And in the journey to building an audience that is just a part of the journey to bringing more freedom into your life.
Okay, cool. So you did mention about the Inspiring Innovation podcast. I should say that that is how I got introduced to you. I've been an avid listener of your podcast. I wrote to you, and you were kind enough to let me join the VIP club, where I kind of learned the ABCs of podcasting. So in a way, I think you have been instrumental in me starting this podcast as well. So thanks a lot for all your support and all the great work that you're doing.
My friend, it's people like you that keep me inspired. It's seeing people actually take action and do it that's worth the world for me, honestly. And I've been following your blog for a while, and I'm very excited to see this podcast go live, because I think it is time to have some unique point of views and thinking outside of the box.
That's right. So just before we move further, I wanted to understand from you about this Inspiring Innovation podcast. So
Mhm.
what made you start this podcast, and where it is right now, and what do you think you want to take this to?
Okay, so that's three good questions. It all started. So I kind of hinted that I'm in love with entrepreneurship, and I've been an entrepreneur for most of my adult and young life. And at some stage, I started a software company, and I took some bad advice, and I had to make it work somehow. And it was either start over, which I didn't have the mental energies to do at that stage, or just say I'm going to put this thing aside and I'm going to go to the corporate world and try my luck and make ends meet. And that's what I did. So I ended up spending almost 2 years in corporate. I had a very good job in corporate terms, which means I was getting good money. I had a car, I had a cell phone, I was working over 300 hours a month, the real corporate life. And I was getting appreciated. And I think that's the one thing that entrepreneurs all miss on, is the feeling of being appreciated. Because if you're just working alone and you're not shipping and you're not talking to customers, there's no one there to tell you, man, that was a good job. So, but I got disillusioned with it, and I started listening to podcasts by chance. I think I found Leslie Samuel, and from him I found Pat Flynn of Smart Passive Income, and they inspired me to go back to entrepreneurship. So I left corporate with absolutely no clue what I'm gonna do. I just knew I cannot stay there, because as long as I was there, I'm an absolute person, like either 0 or 1. There's nothing in between. It's black or white. So if I work for someone else, I cannot work for myself, and if I work for myself, I can't work for someone else. That's, by the way, something I don't recommend. The transition should be more smoother than that. But anyway, I left, and then I found an opportunity to start a digital magazine on the iPad, which is just booming at the time. And I thought, well, what do I want to write about? And I realized that my calling is to help spread this word and help other people like me, or not so like me, but with the same struggles, with the same thoughts of there must be more than just this. I want to have the freedom to have time with my family, with my loved ones, to create and see all the places I wanted to see. So I launched a magazine about that, just about spreading the word. That was Inspiring Innovation. That was the inception of it. And 1 year later, I relaunched it as a podcast, which turns out was a much better match to my audience. I don't know if you have time to read 60 pages long of a magazine, but everybody who's my target audience is commuting or going to work. Everybody has time to listen to a podcast. So that's how the podcast was created. It was just repurposing of what I'd done, or pivoting, depends how you want to look at it. And that's when it really caught fire. That's when I started to getting emails from people like you and many others. And I think that's when I really knew I hit a chord. And from then it was just growing it, listening to what the audience is telling you, and trying to help them solve their pain and their problems.
Yeah, so you very, very rightly said. I do listen to your podcast when I'm driving back and forth from my office. So, in fact, we have a lot of parallels as well. So, I had a business which I was running for a couple of years. Again, took some bad advice, didn't work out, joined the corporate world. I've been in the corporate world now for almost 10 years. And I'm, again, as you said, that itch of getting or becoming an entrepreneur again is really strong now. And probably that's also one of the reasons why I blog and I'm starting this podcast, because as you rightly said, there is no appreciation coming forward from in the corporate world, and there needs to be some way of doing something which satisfies your creative urge, as well as the need for you to actually see that, or share your point of view to the world. There are people who come back to me, write to me by reading my blog. Some of them have indicated that they have been able to switch their ability to innovate, their understanding of the sales process as well. So that is what keeps me going as well. And I'm surely hoping that the podcast that I'm starting now also helps me connect to a larger audience, and me achieve what you are already seeing as way of success.
Well, I hope
So
it is,
you
and I'm excited about it. Sorry, carry on.
No, I'm excited about it as well. So you did mention that the magazine was repurposed as the podcast. So does that mean the magazine no longer exists?
The magazine exists, but while it used to be that I did the interview for the magazine, and then we had a writer sit down, write an article about it, so people could either read, or as it's an iPad, could either read or watch it in video. And doing a magazine, there's a lot to it. You need to have text, you need to have articles, you need to get some ads. There's a lot of work involved. And at the beginning, if you go back to the old episodes of Inspire Innovation, you might hear me say, Inspire Innovation Magazine, welcome to blah, 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 because those were interviews that I took the video, took the audio out of it, and just repurposed the audio. And when I saw how it clicked with the audience, I just made up my mind to say, okay, if people still want to consume this content as a magazine, I will let them do that, but my main attention is the podcast. So what we do now is actually do the podcast first, and then repurpose the show notes and all the PDFs that we attach and everything, repurpose that back into the magazine.
Oh, okay. That's nice. So, tell me something. How do you decide whom you want to invite on the show, and how do you actually get them on the show as well? So, what do you do?
Okay, so the biggest secret of getting people on the show, that's the biggest secret of podcasting, is that it's not that hard. Mostly, people don't say no.
Okay.
Um, and I think for many beginner podcasters, the struggle is because we are afraid to ask. And I know that, that's where I've been when I started my magazine. I was I think it took me 2 months to send my first pitch, and that was to Pat Flynn. And then Pat Flynn said yes the same day. So that was 2 months I could launch earlier. So basically, as I said, the secret is A, usually they agree. B, it's about the pitch. If you send an email that is very, very long and it's all about you, no matter if you're pitching for an interview or for anything else, you won't get the response you want. If you can pitch your podcast very shortly, because when it's short, it shows you appreciate their time. So if you do it short and interesting, they usually will tend to say yes. And even if they say no, you can ask why not, or when can you do that? So, Seth Godin rejected me, but other people didn't. Um, how I pick interviewees, once I had a clear customer avatar, audience avatar, I knew in my mind who am I talking to. It was just much easier. I attend many of the events of the niche, so I know a lot of online entrepreneurs, etc. So I just keep my ears open, and when I hear a story that I think Matt would like to listen to this, that's when I ask for an interview. And it also helps once you know who's the audience, it's much easier to sell the interview.
Yeah. Okay. So, let's slightly pivot here. So, I understand that podcasts are all free, right? So, people,
Mhm.
audience listen to the podcast and the content that you generate.
Mhm.
And I also know that we need to pay our bills. So, how do you bridge these two?
Well, you can charge for podcasting. That's what Andrew Warner does on Mixergy. So it's
Hmm.
possible.
Hmm.
Um, that said, yes, podcasting is generally free, and I suggest you keep it free because it's a great lead magnet. For me, I have a few businesses that bring in money that I'm slowly closing them down to be able to fully focus on inspiring innovation. There's a magazine that's bringing in an income, and looking forward, the main source of income is going to be affiliate products and much more than that, the podcast incubator.
Okay. Okay. So, if I understand correctly, you're a solopreneur, right?
True.
Or do you have a team?
Well, how would you define a solopreneur versus a non-solopreneur? We had that discussion at home actually a few weeks ago. Like if I have a VA, does that make me a not solopreneur, or is that still a solopreneur?
So that's still a solopreneur, actually, if you ask me, because you are
Okay,
taking all
so
the decisions in your business.
yes,
Okay.
I have VAs, I have people I outsource to, but decision making, I don't have to call it solopreneur. Julie is my business partner, and
Hmm.
Julie is my girlfriend too. Um, So I make most of the decisions with her. So you can call it solopreneur, duopreneur. Uh,
Okay. So one of the challenges that I've heard from a lot of solopreneurs is that it becomes a little lonely at times, and it becomes really difficult for you to consistently stay focused. So what do you
mhm.
do to do that? To not allow boredom or not allow procrastination to set in?
Okay, so procrastination, I think, is a lot to do more with our own resistance than our loneliness. Although I agree with the definition of entrepreneurial loneliness. It's definitely something that is a big issue. And when you are lonely, your energy levels drop, and then you start procrastinating. So there is a loop there. Um, I'll split it into two. So for the loneliness, I have two mastermind groups that I'm on that meet bi-weekly. So effectively every week I have a mastermind group. I try to connect with my audience, with people
Meron,
like
I think
you.
we lost. Meron, we lost the two mastermind group that you were saying. Could you please repeat that?
Okay, so in terms of the handling the loneliness, I have two mastermind groups that I'm on. So each one of them is bi-weekly, so it ends up being that every week I have a group that I'm on. I try to connect on Skype and Google Hangouts with friends and with people like you, and it's really important to make those friendships when you end up going to these events or meetups or whatever, and you have them in any major city around the world. The most important thing is to connect and to create friendships. And I won't say it easy because living in Israel, I don't have friends in my time zone. Everybody is either 5, 6, 7 hours behind me or 7 to 10 hours ahead of me.
But I
But it's
thought that Israel. I'm sorry, but I thought that Israel is a really hotbed for innovative products coming
true.
out.
That's very true. Um, yeah, you caught me here. So I don't have any. I have one Israeli entrepreneurial friend. So I need to work on that. That's true. Sometimes the solution is right in front of your eyes, right?
Yeah.
That's a good point. So yeah, that's to deal with the loneliness and procrastination. For me, the best solution for procrastination is to define your goals for the next 3 months, plan backwards from the end goal to the milestones, plan backwards from the milestones to the actual tasks, and then you have a plan. And the more plans you have and the more bound they are to time, the less of an opportunity you have to procrastinate. And I usually schedule doubt time. I schedule myself to freak out from the 18th till the 20th.
So is that your chill time, 18th to 20th every month?
No, although that's a good idea to create that. No, I gave that example because that's when I had a scheduled time to freak out about the podcast incubator when we were rolling it out. But you know what? That's not a bad idea. Downtime from the 18th to the 20th every month. I'll have to come
So
back to you with that idea.
so in fact, in the olden days in India, there used to be the habit of having every month 2 days, which is what do you call when there is no moon in the sky? So it's
I don't know, but
so
let's go with no moon in the sky because
yeah,
I get
yeah.
that.
So so every month when there is no moon in the sky, though that and the next day was always a holiday. So that
Wow.
was time to be explicitly spent with family, with friends, and generally to freak out.
Well, there's a lot of wisdom in the Indian ancestry, so definitely there's something there.
Yeah. So why did you choose Inspiring Innovation as the name for your show and the magazine? So is there a story
Um,
behind it?
well, so when I was starting the magazine and I was thinking what I want to do, I had several ideas. One of them, as I said, was to spread the word of innovation, of entrepreneurship. And we were having a Google Hangout of people that were using the same platform like me. So they were having a hangout like, see the graduates, see how well they're doing, give us your money kind of thing. And you know those webinars. And
Yeah.
one of them, who's now a good friend, a very good friend, he just launched a magazine and he had Pat Flynn and he had this and he had that. I was looking at it saying, dude, that guy just stole my idea. Like I was super pissed. And I wrote to him actually on Twitter saying, I'm watching you and kicking myself in the butt for not taking action. So he answered me on Twitter saying, just do it. What's the worst thing that could happen? And his name is Ralph Quintero. He's the former vice president of JBL, Amazon best-selling author of Life After Corporate, and an amazing friend. And so I was super pissed. And Julie took me out for a walk. We walked for like 30, 40 minutes. And until I said, you know what, he actually didn't steal my idea. He actually did the market validation for me. Because the success of his magazine is proving there's something in there. And he already explained to all the people I wanted to interview what is a digital magazine and why should they interview. So basically, he busted the door open for me. And some calmness came there. And then I think I was telling Julie what I want my magazine to be. And she said, well, it's kind of like innovation and inspiration. And I said, inspiring innovation. That's when it clicked. So now looking backwards, that might not have been the best name. I mean, it's not super clear, but if it resonates with you emotionally, you're my target audience. If you know what inspiring innovation means to you and it moves you, then I know you're my audience. I've got comments from people saying that it doesn't mean anything, like it's not a very clear name. And that's true, it's not a very clear name. But if it doesn't move you, then you're not my audience.
Yeah, that's right. So that was one of the struggles for me as well. I've been struggling to define a name for my podcast for the last 2 months now. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, I've been thinking of starting a podcast now for 6 months. And what finally did it for me was that podcast, the blog that I wrote, and the mail that you sent to me saying what happened to your podcast, and that was a kick in my butt, saying that, buddy, if you have to start something, then you better do it now. And that inspired the post, and I launched the podcast. And I will always be thankful for what you did there. So,
I I'm just honored to be a part of it, seriously.
yeah, so thanks a lot. So, one further question that I have in terms of your personal equation with a lot of other podcasters. I have seen all the podcasters talking about mastermind groups and they being part of some or the other mastermind groups. In India, the place where I live in, there are no mastermind groups as such. The concept of a mastermind group also is non-existent in a way. So
Mm-hmm.
how do we join one of these mastermind groups? And if you have to suggest a few names for really for entrepreneurs who want to really uh, find peers and bounce off ideas, I think that's what mastermind groups do. So what would some of these mastermind groups be?
Well, the easiest way to start one is think about the people you meet in these meetups and stuff and made friends with, and that are lonely too because there are no mastermind groups in India, and just pitch them the idea. And the concept of a mastermind group at the end of the day is few people that get together every week or every 2 weeks or every month or every 3 months, whatever works for them. I suggest every 2 weeks, and work in synergy to improve each other businesses. That's basically all there is to it. I have the process that I used that I learned from a book called, well, I learned it from an internet marketer from Australia called Ed Dale, and he learned it from Chet Holmes in his book The Ultimate Sales Machine. It's called the PEQ process. But basically, whatever process you use to run the mastermind, at the end of the day, it's a few entrepreneurs that get together. You say, what's the number one struggle that you have with your business right now? And people try to come up with ideas. That's all there is to it. How to get people there? Well, when you start networking, you can just ask. Like that's how I got on both of my mastermind groups. One of them are members from it's a combination of people I met on the one-day mastermind Chris Tucker held in London and people I met in the Tropical Think Tank event that I attended in the Philippines in March. The other one are people that I met at the New Media Expo. And we were just all looking for a good mastermind to be a part of. So we decided to make one. And I think it goes back again to just asking. Like, just say to someone, these are the people I have in mind. Would you like to join for a mastermind? And I think you'll be surprised by who joins.
Okay, so you also
And
mentioned in your introduction that you were part of a radio show for 10 years. So
Hmm.
can you talk about that a little bit more and how that has influenced or has an impact on your show?
Right. So I always had a dream of being on the radio. I think no one asked me about it, so that's a cool question. I always had a dream of being on radio, like doing the music and all of that, ever since I can remember myself. And when I was 15, I went past a radio station that was near my school, and they had an actual an educational program where they taught radio and communications to school students. But I wasn't a part of that program, and I told my friend, man, I wish I could be on radio. And the window opened, and the producer of the station said, come in. So for the first few weeks, I was reading soccer scores on their sports show and doing like coverage of the Spanish football league and who got injured and whatnot. Which is funny because most people don't believe I broadcasted sports, but that was my first few weeks, maybe even few months. And then I learned to be a sound technician, a producer, a music editor, until I became a broadcaster. And actually, I left high school when I was 16 and moved on to college. And my last year at high school, I spent most of my lessons. I didn't go to the lessons. I went and broadcasted for hours and helped producing, etc., in the radio. And as my career took off, I just kept coming back. I had a weekly show for a very long time. I actually, one of my businesses that is making money is a software I wrote for the Israeli Broadcasting Association. Um, and it's always been there for me. It's another family, and for me, sitting there in that room with all the albums it's like a temple. How it affected
I
me?
know.
Well, sorry.
No, no, no. Please go on.
How it affected me? I think well, it made it a lot easier for me to sit down and do a podcast. But that said, it was very awkward for me to do it in English because, of course, my main focus in radio was Israeli music. So I interviewed a lot of artists, but in Hebrew and about music, not in English and about entrepreneurship. And that took some time to get used to. But um, but I have a love for radio. I think radio is an amazing thing. And by podcasting, I get to do that from my home every week. I mean, that's amazing to me.
I know that's a cool story. I mean, you walking past a radio show and saying that you would love to be on the radio, and you getting a chance then and there. That was
Yeah,
just amazing.
and it just proves the point that you need to tell the universe what you want because you never know what's going to happen.
That's right. So I think in a way, life actually prepares you for what you are destined to do uh, in your life, I guess. So
Yeah.
when I was growing up, I was always interested in acting. So I've always played the lead role in the plays that we have in school. After I finished school, in college again, I was an actor for the college troupe.
Wow.
Once I joined my professional organization, I again played a small part in a professional play that was staged. So I guess all of that also in a way prepares me to look at things in a slightly different way than a lot of other people do. And I guess that is also one of the things that will help me going forward, because theater teaches you diction, it teaches you voice modulation, it teaches you to control your breathing, and I guess all of these also play a part in podcasting to a certain extent.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest struggle people have, and I have it too in English, is maintaining the right enunciation and pronunciation and all of that. And definitely, having that and having the experience and the love for being the one on stage. I mean, many podcasters shy away from leading their audience, and so they do an interview show where they're very much maintaining as passive as possible. They just ask questions. And I think that's great for the beginning because you're building branding by association, but later, I love it when people take a little bit more presence in the show, do some solo episodes, stuff like that, and you having the love to being on stage, it's just a different stage.
I know. And so you've interviewed so many entrepreneurs now, right? Some of
Mm-hmm.
them really awesome. I guess you also had Guy Kawasaki on your show.
Yeah.
So what have you learned from all these guys which you've actually used in your business, which has actually helped you a lot in whatever you are trying to achieve?
Um, okay.
I guess
So
what I want to know is the best advice that you have used that you got on your show.
I'll give you a few best advices because I can't pick one. But the first one that comes to mind is from Jamie Tardy, and she interviewed hundreds of millionaires, and that was don't judge other people's outside against your inside,
Okay.
which was it's a wake-up call because everybody who interviews Jamie asks her, well, what do these people do differently? And she said they don't do anything differently. You're judging the outside against your own inside. Stacey Ferreira, who launched a business that Richard Branson gave her $1 million when she was 19, said that what matters is execution and not the idea. And that's a motive that's been coming up a lot through the interviews, that everybody has great ideas. But if you don't execute, a poor idea well executed will do better in the market than a great idea not executed at all, because 0% of 1 billion is still zero. So execution, validation, also something that comes up a lot. Validate before you build, and connect with your audience. I mean, there's this saying that the money is in the list, and I oppose to that because you can have a cold list that's not generating you anything. So I would say the money is in an audience. The money is in having people engage with you that appreciate and trust what you do and share with you what's on their mind. That's where an amazing solopreneur business can exist.
So, do you also compare yourself and with all the superstars of podcasting like Pat Flynn or James Altucher or some people like them? And if you do, does that inspire you to do a better job, or does that scare you at times? That these I'm competing with people like them for audience attention, and scares you a bit.
Well, so I try not to think about competing them on audience attention because iTunes alone has 535 million active listeners. That's just iTunes. That doesn't include Android and other podcatchers, etc. So the market is big enough for everybody, I think. And I think people that you gave an example of Pat, and that's a funny one. I'll tell you why it's a funny example in a second. But for instance, people who listen to Pat won't necessarily like my show. People who listen to me might not necessarily like his show, or they would like both, or they would hate both. I mean, there's all sorts of places on the spectrum, and I try not to get bothered with it. That said, the reason it took me so long to create my podcast incubator was because my good friend John Dumas was doing the same thing. And it's funny because I was sitting on the San Diego pier with John talking about this idea, and I knew he was about to do the same thing. And I told him that I don't know if I should do it if you're already doing it. And he looked at me and said, but I'm not you and you're not me. Like, it doesn't matter that what other people are doing. If you can add something to the table, for me, that's making things much more step by step without leaving any blanks along the way, much more an educational thing rather than just giving you the information. And that's not compared to John. That's just generally my unique selling proposition. And I was having that conversation with John just 1.5 months after I was sitting in Chris Ducker's mastermind group in London. And I was talking about something, and I said to Chris, well, but Pat Flynn did blah, blah, blah. And he said, stop. if you are going to compare yourself to Pat Flynn every day, A, that's madness, and B, you'll be the most miserable man. Like, Pat Flynn is an amazing success story, and in many ways he is the anomaly of the anomaly. And I'm so happy for him for what he achieved because he inspired me to follow. But that said, there's no point in comparing yourself to any of these people. Just be yourself. When you compare, you start following. You go back to team consumer, and you need to be in team producer.
Interesting.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because one of the fears that I also had was the fear that uh, uh, when I listen to people like you, with Pat, John Lee Dumas, James Altucher, and I don't know whether I can even be 10% or 5% of the kind of quality that you guys put out. But at the same time, now that you say you are you and I am me, I think that probably is something that I also listened to John Lee Dumas in his show talk about. And that's also something James Altucher talks about when he says choose yourself. And I think that's also one of the reasons why I decided to take the plunge, saying that okay, let's see. I'm sure that the first few episodes would not be as great, but gradually as we go along, maybe I also will have a unique voice and which people might want to listen to and follow.
I think
So
so. And
that's
my
yeah,
first episodes were not that good. My first interviews were not that good, and that came from after doing 10 years of radio. But still, once I moved to English, to a new playground, they were not that good at the beginning, and I'm still getting better. And you mentioned James Altucher that I love because James is just amazing. But you talk to people in Silicon Valley, and they are like, "Wow, James is so brilliant." Like, the top people in Silicon Valley love James to death. My point being, again, James is an anomaly, but you can be someone else's James. Don't try to replace
that's
James for someone else. You can be someone else's James.
That's right. So I would like to switch a little bit here again. I would like to understand from you what kind of homework do you do before you interview someone, and are there specific kind of questions that work best from a podcasting standpoint, uh, and or is it more about the guest and the flow and whatever the guest says, and you kind of take that and follow it up. So, what's the kind of preparation and the interviewing style that you have?
Well, that depends. As you said, it's an interview style. That depends on what you want to be. For instance, my show, I have a clear idea of what I want to get out of the interviewee, but I don't always know what path are we going to take in order to get there. I just know where I'm going. I'm not always sure how we're going to get there. My show has a lot of editing done afterwards. So on average, what you hear on the show when it goes live is 40 to 70% of the raw material that we have. So that's a choice I make because I think that the real golden nuggets come from a real conversation. But a real conversation isn't always interesting to those that are listening all the way through. So there's a lot of editing going on. On the other hand, you have style of shows that are much with higher pace, like Started Out with Jared Easley, that's around 20 minutes. Entrepreneur on Fire, that's around 25 to 35 minutes. They have a fixed set of questions. This allows a few things. A, the audience always knows what are they going to get. So if you like it, you'll like all the shows. B, it makes it a lot easier to produce and a lot easier to edit because there's not much editing to be done, right? For me, either me or my VA, so my VA will do a background research, come up with the recent articles and interviews, etc. Then I would listen if I have the time. Sometimes I outsource it. I try to listen to the last few interviews my interviewees have done and try to notice what blank spots, what blind spots are left in those interviews and attack those, because more often than not, interviewees segue or go towards the same places that they feel comfortable in, that they already shared 1,000 times, And when you share the same thing 1,000 times, you're not giving a very good interview. So I try to go to places that they haven't been yet, which surprises them and creates a new kind of conversation. But I always know, like when I talked with Danny Iny just the other week, Danny is a genius in strategizing how to build an audience. So I knew no matter how I go through his story, we're going to end up talking about audience building strategy. So I have like a mission statement of what I want to get from this interview. With John Dumas, it was how much money do you actually charge from each sponsor? That was my mission statement. And it took 35 minutes to get there because we talked about Entrepreneur on Fire and his journey and sponsorships. And every time I asked him something about it, he answered a little bit off what I actually asked because he wasn't at the time yet sharing the exact specific of I charge $18 for this and $40 for this multiplied by this, etc. And that was one of the first time he shared that because I knew that's where I want to get. But as I said, it depends on what show are you trying to create.
Interesting. Because my style would also be more free-flowing conversation kinds rather than having very fixed questions. If you also notice, I'm passionate about 5 or 6 things, which is sales, marketing, innovation, leadership, entrepreneurship, and strategy. So I'm going to have guests who will be more focused on either one of these 6 topics that I incidentally call smiles. So that's what I intend to talk about. So I guess my show will also be more like your show, which probably will need a lot of edits happening in the show as well. I do not know though how I will do the edits.
Well, you have the podcast incubator that can teach you everything in how to do the edits, or you can outsource it.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, please go on.
No, I was going to say, that's again an option you make. Some people have the same style like my show, but don't edit anything. They say everything stays in the conversation. I personally don't like listening to those shows, so I don't want to create those similar things because I don't want to create something I wouldn't want to personally listen to. But some people love the raw, uncut format, so you can save a lot of time by going that way. It's all a matter of choice. And that's a cool thing. Like there are no rules.
That's true. So that's also one of the things which I kind of like about podcasting, that there are no rules. You can decide what format you want, whether you want to go audio only, audio and video, whether you want to do a really good edit quality show, or whether you want to leave it open as a conversation, whether you want to do very standard specific questions like John Lee Dumas does, or whether you want to do free-flowing conversation like James Altucher does. So I think that's the freedom that this medium provides us.
Absolutely.
That's very, yeah. So as an entrepreneur, what are some of your top priorities for the next probably 5 years? So do you make 5-year plans, or do you take things as it comes? So if you have a plan, if you could just share what your plans are.
I was making 5 years plans until I had a very bad car accident that taught me that planning more than a year or two ahead is too much. So I started doing 1 to 2 years plan, and then I had another car accident. So now I'm doing, I have a general idea of what I want to make, what I want to achieve in 2014, but my main focus is 90 days plan. And then after 90 days plan, so I'll put it this way. I know where I want to be. What's the end goal in mind? I know I'm here, and I want to be
where you want to be.
Yeah, I know where I want to end up. And for every quarter, I sit down and say, okay, in order to go from where I am now to my target destination, here's the move I'm going to be. And it's like tacking on a map if you're a sailor. That's something I learned from Mike Michalowicz, the toilet paper entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So basically, I say, okay, this is where I'm going to be. I'm going to move to in 90 days, and then when 90 days pass, I take I take my head up from the screen, I look around, see where I've ended up, and readjust for the next 90 days. So for me, for instance, January to March, the first 90 days of 2014 were about launching the podcast incubator. The 90 days following are about building my sales funnel. I don't know what will my next 90 days be, because I first need to see where I end up.
That's interesting because one of my uncles, who's been a very, very successful entrepreneur himself, he always used to tell me that being an entrepreneur and leading a business is like driving your car.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to know where you are going, and at the same time, you don't need to know the entire route. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so you go a certain direction. There is a what if there is a roadblock? You just change directions, take a different route.
Exactly.
So the only thing that you need to know is where you want to reach, and have the will to actually drive your car, have enough fuel in your car, which is the cash flow,
Yeah.
to ensure that you reach your destination.
Absolutely, and if you take an example from sailing, if you know where you want to go, but there's a crosswind or something, you cannot sail directly to it. You need to use the wind or the cash flow and do it at a different direction, at a triangular direction or something. So yeah, I love that analogy.
Okay, Meron, I think we are almost up for our time. Before we conclude, if you can just tell our audience where they can find you, and yeah,
Sure. So you can email me, and will we have show notes? Because my name is a little bit hard
yes,
to
yes, we will have show
spell.
notes.
But you can email me at m@meronboreka.com, and you can attest that I try to answer emails as quickly as possible. I do answer
Yes,
all.
that I can.
Sometimes it does take me some time. Um, that's a great tip I got from Srini Rao, by the way.
Yeah, I listen to his podcast as well. He's amazing. The kind of guests that he gets on his show are just mind blowing. The other
Yeah.
day I was listening to his podcast about he had one of the monks on his show, and
Mhm.
the insights that the monk, ex-monk rather, gave were really fascinating, and they were very similar to another guest that he had on the show, who had done like 24 bank robberies, and
Yes,
so
Srini
that
has
was
great
like
people
amazing.
on his show. We're talking about well, I call it Podcast FM, even though it has a new name now. But yeah, Srini has a great show. We should add that to the show notes. If you want to check out me, you can just head over to meronbareket.com or at meronbareket on Twitter, and just whatever way you want, let me know you came from this podcast, and I'll be more than happy to chat.
Thanks a lot, Meron, for spending the time with us. And I wish you all the very best for all your future endeavors.
Thank you, my friend. It's been a great pleasure and a big honor, and I can't wait to see this show take off.
Same here. Thank you.